Why do we yawn? Why do we get dizzy? Why do we dream? Why do we sneeze? And why do our limbs fall asleep and then we feel like there's a million needles poking us? If you don't know the answer to any of these, stick around. Why do we yawn? Yawning is a semi-involuntary reflex where we open our mouth wide, we take a deep breath and then exhale slowly. Now, as for why it happens, there is no single universally accepted explanation, but science offers several complementary theories. First one, and the most prominent one, is the brain cooling hypothesis. So when you yawn, cool air enters through your open mouth and nasal passages. This cools the blood in the brain's frontal lobe and improves thermoregulation. Now, as to why it matters, the brain works best within a narrow temperature range. A slight increase in brain temperature due to stress, drowsiness, or overuse can impair focus and performance. And when it happens is typically during transitions between alertness and fatigue, for example, waking up, getting tired, or switching from one mental state to another. Now, interestingly, another part of yawning is social and psychological yawning, which is another word for contagion, basically. So contagious yawning. When you see someone else yawn, you hear yawning sounds, or even read about yawning, or hear about yawning, or even watching this video right now, you may get the urge to yawn. But why is that? It happens because the mirror neurons in your brain, they fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing the same action. For example, if you watch someone smile, your mirror neurons activate as if you were smiling yourself. Contagious yawning is thought to be a byproduct of this mirroring system. So when you see someone yawn, your mirror neurons simulate the action internally. This subconscious mimicry can trigger your own yawn. Also, it's more common among people with strong emotional connections, so maybe your family or your friends, and less so among strangers. Number 2, why do we get dizzy when we spin? Dizziness from spinning is caused by a mismatch of sensory information, particularly between your inner ear and your eyes. Your body relies on a complex system to maintain balance, and spinning disrupts that coordination. Now, things start to kind of get complicated here, so bear with me as I try to explain this as autistically as possible. Now, first we have to know the concept of the vestibular system, the inner ear, basically. It has two parts. One which has 3 fluid-filled loops oriented in horizontal, vertical, and diagonal. Each canal detects rotational movement, and inside there's a fluid, and there are hair-like sensors that detect the movement that's going on. So when you rotate your head, what happens is the fluid lags behind the movement due to inertia, bending the hair cells and sending a signal to the brain saying, "We are spinning." Now let's give an example. What happens when you spin? So let's say, first you start spinning in one direction. Second, the fluid inside the semicircular canals start to move. Third, the hair cells in the canals detect the motion and signal to the brain. 4, after spinning for several seconds, the fluid catches up and moves at the same speed as the canal. So you no longer feel like you're spinning, despite being spinning. And then when you stop, the fluid keeps moving due to inertia. And then finally, this ongoing motion now falsely signals to your brain, we're still spinning, even though your body and your eyes say you're not. So the brain ends up receiving jumbled signals. The inner ear is saying we're moving, and the eyes are saying, well, no, we're not. The result is dizziness, loss of balance, and nausea. Why do we even feel nauseous? This comes from a primitive evolutionary defense system, so when the brain receives conflicting signals, it interprets it as potential neurotoxic poisoning. The response? It activates nausea and vomiting as a protective mechanism, just in case you've ingested something harmful. Number 3, what and why are dreams? Dreams are a series of thoughts, images, emotions, and sensations that occur involuntarily in the mind during sleep, most vividly during REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement. Dreams occur during actually all stages of sleep, but the most vivid story-like dreams occur during REM sleep, where brain activity is high and resembles that of waking. Non-REM dreams might be shorter, like thoughts, basically, emotionally flat. Now, why do we dream? There's a couple theories. Firstly, memory consolidation. So the brain processes and organizes information learned during the day. And then dreams might reflect this sorting process, like watching the highlight reel of your waking experiences. Second theory is emotional regulation, so dreams would help you process emotional experiences like stressful stuff and unresolved issues. And the amygdala, involved in fear and emotions, is highly active during REM sleep, which is a possible explanation as to why dreams can be intense or bizarre. And then finally, the psychoanalytic theories by Freud and Jung. Sigmund Freud used psychoanalysis to basically help his patients. Dreams, in his words, are expressions of unconscious desires and repressed conflicts. Now, why do dreams feel so real, yet so illogical? Your sensory systems, as in visual, emotional, and memory, are switched on, but your critical thinking center is dialed down. This allows you to accept impossible scenarios like, flying, seeing deceased people, without questioning them until you wake up. This ties well into lucid dreaming, actually. Now, what is a lucid dream? A lucid dream is one where the dreamer becomes aware that they are dreaming and can sometimes control the experience. But why does this happen? It ties back to what I said. It involves increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is typically asleep during regular REM dreams. Also, why do some dreams repeat or seem to continue? Recurrent dreams often reflect unresolved emotional issues or psychological patterns. Continued dreams may occur because the same memory networks are reactivated during similar REM cycles. Oh, and as for nightmares, some researchers view them as failed attempts at emotional regulation or threat rehearsal. Alright, so on to number 4. Why do we sneeze? Sneezing is basically a powerful reflex designed to expel irritants from your nasal passages. It's your body's way of protecting your respiratory system from inhaled threats like dust, pollen, microbes, all of that. So it acts as a first-line immune defense for the nasal cavity, basically flushing out invaders before they reach the lungs. Like coughing, it serves as a high-pressure air blast to remove irritants, except it's focused in the nose and sinuses, not the throat or lungs like coughing is. So how does it happen? Firstly, irritation detection. Sensory nerve endings in the nasal area detect mechanical, chemical, or biological irritants. These nerve endings send a signal to the sneezing center, right? So that nerves transmit the irritation signal to somewhere in the brainstem, often called the sneeze center. And this area coordinates the reflex, kind of like it's literally a reflex headquarters. So that after that preparation for the sneeze, the brain activates a series of muscles in a tightly choreographed sequence. Your eyes will close, your tongue will move, and the chest muscles, diaphragm, abdominal muscles, and vocal cords prepare for rapid contraction. You inhale deeply and temporarily hold your breath, and finally you sneeze. A forceful, explosive exhalation through the nose and the mouth occurs. Also, something more that's quite interesting is that some people, about 10 to 30% of people, will sneeze when exposed to bright light, like walking out of a dark room into sunlight. This is known as the photic sneeze reflex, or ACHOO syndrome. Also, why do we sometimes fail to sneeze? If the irritation stimulus weakens, as in you move away from the irritant, the brain may abort the reflex, or sometimes trying to suppress a sneeze can interrupt the sequence, but it's not advisable to do so forcefully. Also notable that people with certain neurological disorders or damage to the brainstem may lose the ability to sneeze. Interestingly, you also can't sneeze while you're asleep because the sneeze reflex is inactive during REM and deep sleep stages. And finally, number 5, why do we feel pins and needles when our foot falls asleep? This is a very interesting one. That prickly, tingling sensation like a million tiny needles poking you, it's a result of temporary compression or disruption of nerves, often from pressure or restricted blood flow. How does it work? Let's look at the biological mechanism, right? So nerves, we can say they're kind of like electrical cables. And nerves carry electrical signals from the brain and spinal cord to the rest of your body and back again. These signals control movement and transmit sensations like touch, pain, temperature, pressure, all of that. Now, compression will block that signal. When you sit or you sleep in a position that puts pressure on your arm, leg, foot, you may compress the nerves and or blood vessels. And this does 2 things. It reduces blood flow to the nerve, depriving it of oxygen and nutrients. And secondly, it mechanically disturbs the nerve's ability to send or receive proper signals. As a result, the nerve fibers misfire, sending jumbled, erratic impulses to the brain. Now, complicated stuff aside, let me try to explain how the pins and needles begin. So, we've put pressure on it, and as the pressure is released, so we start moving again, and blood flow returns, the nerves begin to wake up. What happens is they start firing randomly before fully regaining control. That is what produces tingling, prickling, numbness, burning, buzzing sensations. It's also notable to state that it happens in certain body parts more often. It usually happens in the extremities, as in feet, hand, or arms, that are farthest from the spine and contain long peripheral nerves that are more vulnerable to compression. Alright, I've got 15 more of these, but I can't fit this in one video, so if you enjoyed what you saw, please subscribe and tell me if I should make part 2. Bye bye.